Welcome back to the wood shop, guys. Today we're talking about woodworking tools, and one of the most used tools in this shop is a router. And today we're going to be talking specifically about routers and router accessories. Now I have a link in the description for all these tools I'm using today. And with that being said, let's jump right into it. So the first tool we're going to show you today, it's this attachment to add to the bottom of your router. Now I will say up front, when the guys over at Banggood sent me a list of tools I could kind of pick from, I looked at this one and instantly thought this would be a great tool. However, when it arrived, it did not fit any of my routers. So I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. I actually ended up having to go buy a new router, which was, I needed a new router like I needed a hole in the head. I've got 7 already, so I didn't really need one. However, I wanted to demo this to you. And as you can see, it's very simple in the way it works. It attaches with 4 screws, and these jaws can be moved in and out. And you can use this for a lot of things. Mainly for me, I was going to use it for mortising. And you can see I've got a little bit in here, and we're going to show you down here exactly how that works. So there's a couple ways I actually planned on using this tool, and mainly, like I said, for mortising. But I'm going to show you a couple different ways. Now I've got this set fairly dead center, got these jaws locked down. So this is the first way, and with this you could make something similar to like a domino or a loose tenon joinery, that kind of thing. Very easy to do though. Let's turn this on and show you how that works. As you can see, it's not perfectly dead center. I didn't do a whole lot of measuring back and forth, but even still, had you had a piece coming in here to attach to that, use the same setup, it's going to be lined up perfectly. You can fit that loose tenon down in there and it'll work great. Now let me set up the other part and I'll show you how I was going to do that. And as you can see here, I've actually attached a couple small pieces of wood here to act as a stop. These will also act as a stop on their own, and this will basically give us a wider mortise, and you'll see exactly how that works too. And as you can tell, I didn't go super deep with that one, but it's a very nice cut. Now you could add it just for tenon just as it is, or you could square up these corners with a chisel. Either way, that little tool right there is going to be a nice little addition to the shop. Make those mortises much easier. Now for our next tool, way back before the days of power tools, everything was all hand tools. And this exactly is that. It is a handheld router plane. I'm sure some of you know about these, but for those of you that don't, basically you have a blade in the center here that acts sort of like a chisel blade or a hand plane blade. And it's great for getting into dados and half laps, that sort of thing, cleaning things up. Back then, that's actually what made your half lap or your dado. And you could do that with something similar to this, which is an edge guide, allows you to make exact same cuts over and over, and you drop it down, cut that groove. Now this one does come with 2 blades. As you can see, here's a flat one. One is, I don't remember what they actually call this, but it's a pointed nose blade. This is good for getting into a lot of spaces like that too, and not tearing up everything. Now this one is a hung Dewey. I don't remember the exact model number, but this is a hung Dewey router plane. Very nicely made. This part up here where you actually dial this up and down is probably one of the smoothest actions I've ever used. And to go along with that, I also had, which is a hung Dewey and Cat's Moses router plane. Kind of the same thing. They took that technology, ultra smooth. But today we're talking about this one. So let's show you ways I use this thing. And just for a quick little demo, I just ran this through the table saw a couple times, just kind of give us a little demo of what we're going to be doing here. Be like a little groove or dado or whatever you'd want to call it, half lap. Basically, you can see all these little uneven edges here, and this is perfect for getting rid of those. And you can use electric router to do that as well, but this is, I don't know, this is pretty fun to use this thing. So we'll get rid of this one in the middle here that's kind of high. We'll knock it out first. Easy enough, and you could also do that with a chisel. And before I forget it, there's a couple different adjustments. You can actually do this as a stop collar so you don't go too far. This actually will lock that blade in place so it's not moving up and down on you. Some nice features, and as I said, the depth adjustment is super, super smooth. And I did run it through a diamond stone and sharpen it up just a little bit. Now, that's probably a little more aggressive cut than I like to be. Let's back off just a hair. And this particular piece of wood is cherry too, so I like the way it works with the tools. Comes out nice and smooth usually. We'll go one more little pass here. As you can see how good that cleaned that up. Works ultra great. I'm happy with that. And let me show you one other thing. Now earlier I was just testing this thing and kind of done the same thing just with a table saw and run that through there. And you can see it cleaned it up good and smooth in there. But just so happened I had a scrap piece of that cherry laying here that happened to fit it perfectly. You can see that may be a little too tight, but that is a good snug fit, and it's smooth all the way around. That makes a ultra nice cut. That one, like I said, it's probably a little too tight, but just so happened I had that one laying around. I thought it was pretty neat that it fit in there just like it did. So for the next accessory we've got here, I was completely 100% thinking about the future of this shop. I have intentions on hopefully sooner than later doing a router table build, and I've got a lot of plans for that. But getting a good router table fence has been on my list for a long time, and this is exactly what they put up on offer. Now I will say, when I looked at this one, I seen the fence and that was kind of it. I didn't realize this is actually meant for a specific router table top because of how it works and it mounts. And mine does not have that, but I can still use the fence, at least for now, on one of my other router tables. And you can see there's a lot of accessories in here, a lot of hardware. It even has sticky tape measures, you know, to set your sizes, that sort of thing. Got several of them in here. But the main thing I was getting at least for today, is the fence itself. And you can see this thing is quite substantial. Very, very nicely made. Now I am going to have to modify this, at least for now, to make it fit the one I've got. But later on, when I do that build, this will get permanently attached to that. And like I said, a lot of accessories in here. This actually got a piece here that'll go over top of your bed itself, kind of keep the stuff out of your eyes and flying up and all that stuff. It's got, this is the part I was talking about. So this is actually meant to attach, I'm assuming, to the underside of a table. And this acts as your rail system to allow that fence to move back and forth. And this goes on here once you get that lined up, and then it locks it in place. You can see how that does not move. And as I said, I don't have that router table top. I could probably come up with something and manufacture it and make it work. I just don't have that set up yet, although we are getting there. But as I said, for right now, we're going to use solely just the fence. Now this, I will say, this fence is way bigger than the router table I'm going to use it on, and I'm going to have to drill a couple holes. I hate to do that on a brand new tool, unfortunately, because this is a very nice made aluminum here. It's got a good color. It also has an attachment for your dust collection and an adapter in case you have a smaller hose, that sort of thing. A couple knobs here I forgot to show you. Loosen those up, and this actually slides back and forth, so you can open that or close it as you need to. But anyway, as I said, let's get over to this old router table and we'll attach this thing. So as you can tell, this is an old Craftsman table, router table I'd picked up years ago. It was cheap, and I just kind of needed a table. But it came with a very cheap made fence, and I have not liked this thing since day one. Now we're going to take this one off. Of course, I'm going to drop the bolt out if I'm not careful. As you can tell, this is much, much smaller than that fence, so it'll look a little goofy. And I may just take a couple clamps and clamp them so I don't have to drill holes into that. That's probably a better idea. Get it lined up where I need it. Now, of course, if I was putting any kind of pressure on that, I'd want to have more than just a clamp. You can see that thing is not very well made. It's kind of flimsy. So let's see what the other one looks like. So I've got this set up as much as I need to anyway. I've decided, as I mentioned, I'm not going to drill holes in this just yet. I'm going to clamp it down. As you can see right here, for dust collection, I pulled the old shop vac, which has, I'm pretty sure it's a 2-inch hose here, but it wasn't quite the same size as this. So I just found a old piece of rubber hose here. It was a little too small. I got it stretched up on here, got the hose in there. So this is going to be a little bit loud. I've just got a simple chamfer bit, nice piece of walnut. We're just going to put an edge on here just to show you kind of how this thing works. But it's going to be a little bit loud, so we'll run it through and show you what it looks like at the end. Pretty nice chamfer there, although it's got some tear out. That bit is way past its lifetime. I really need to get a new one, but either way, it gets it where I need to. Sand that up, and that'll be good to go. Either way, I think this router fence is a great one. As you can see, it's way too wide for this router table, but as I mentioned, that's going to be for a future use. I like this one anyway. I would have purchased this one regardless. We're going to end up making us a router table, hopefully about that wide, and be able to use those pieces I was showing you about earlier, where we can just quick connect, those release clamps, move this back and forth, and get it working the way we want it to. So up next is another good router accessory, or at least we hope it is. It's something I've needed in the shop for a while, and this can be used more ways than one, but they advertise it as a juice groove jig. Basically, anytime you make a cut board, you want to put a juice groove in it. You line these pieces up all around it, run your router along, gives you a perfect juice groove, or that is the idea at least. Now this does look like it contains a lot of moving parts, and I won't bore you with all that. We may just record and then just speed it up. But either way, once we get it together, we'll show you how this works. Now this comes with instructions. I'll be honest with you, they're not the best instructions in the world, but it's fairly simple. But I kept wondering what these 3 pieces were because they don't appear to be part of this. Let me show you what this is. It does not really advertise it as that, but it can also cut circles. So you would attach this piece inside here, and drill a nail or drill a hole, put a nail in there or something similar to that. And on your other end, however far you want to set your diameter of your circle, you would attach that one. Then your router actually sits down over top of that, and then as you cut, it spins, that sort of thing. I've got other methods for that, but I'm sure it works just fine. Although that is not the reason I chose this one. This other little piece is actually meant to attach to your router, and the reason for that, when you are doing the juice groove cutout, it basically wants you to attach that here, so when this part is sitting on the outside of this, you're not tipping your router over. You know, a nice little feature there too. It's probably not one I'm going to use a whole lot. But let's get back to the main part of it. So we've pretty much got everything lined up here. These attach very precisely, so there's no slop once that gets in there. And I'm sure it can be kind of confusing to get these attached just right, so let's go ahead and see if we can't screw that up. So this juice groove jig works a little different than I had originally thought it would, so it's going to take me a little bit to get used to it. My initial thought was you just kind of squeeze this around the edges of it and then just drop your bit in there. It's a little different just because as far as I can tell, you can only set this on top of the board or come underneath and support these pieces from underneath and then raise it up, because if you do this, basically your cutting board is the same height or higher than the jig itself. So we would have to support it up. And also you got to consider how much travel you've got on your bit here. So anyway, I've got it set on top of this one. I've got some double-sided tape. I may come up with a better solution later on. But anyway, I think I've got this set up to where we can cut it. I'm going to go through here and make sure I've got it square. But we're going to cut that juice groove in here and see how it turns out. So this is not working out the way I'd planned. I do have a core box bit, which basically is just a round bit that would allow that juice groove to be cut. Unfortunately, I do not have a guide bushing that will work with it and also allow it to travel the way it needs to. So at least for the time being, I'm just going to use a straight cut bit. You know, that's going to cut the juice groove, even though we could sand it, make it smooth, do what we need it to. But anyway, we're going to show you how that works. We'll turn this on, cut this out. Hopefully it comes out straight. But it'll do the same purpose as that core box bit other than being round. So let's go ahead and get that cut. Okay, so this thing, it's not quite what I thought it was. Don't get me wrong, it works good. It moves how you need it to. I think it'd be great if you're going to inset something. Sitting that on top of this, it didn't go as planned, so some of the shavings actually ended up gathering up in the corner here and caused me to be off. And what that done, it actually caused a little bit of a chip out here, which is not bad. As you can see, this still looks good. I put some wax on it and that kind of thing. Easily make a gift out of this or something you can sell at a craft show, something to that extent. But I think I'm going to do a little bit more practice with this one and see if I can't figure out a foolproof way of making these juice grooves. Mounting it to the top of that, I'm not a big fan of, just because you got to do a lot of measurements. I thought it'd be kind of a, you know, kind of an idiot-proof setup to where you just squeeze it all together, make your cut, and you're done. So it's a little more setup than that, which that's fine. But either way, it's still a pretty good tool. Maybe not one I'd go out now that I know the ins and outs of it. Maybe it's not one I would buy again unless I can figure out a better setup. Maybe you guys have got some experience with one like this, and you can put me a comment in the comment section down there to kind of give me a little pointers as to how a better way of using this one. But like I said, it's made good, that kind of stuff. Just didn't have quite the result that I intended it to. So guys, we're back at it again. I was a little bit frustrated, to be honest with you, when I used this last time. Now don't get me wrong, it done what I wanted it to as far as making a juice groove. I just really didn't care for the way you set it up. And I probably should have read more about that. That's on me. But I want this to work the way I want it to work naturally. And I think I've come up with a solution here. That is going to be to just trap whatever cutting board you've got and make it to where you're not trying to set it up a certain way or whatever. Once it's trapped, set your router in and cut it. No real precise measurements, that kind of stuff. Whereas setting this on top of there, you got to measure it out and line it up. And I used double-sided tape, and I didn't like that part of it either because it kind of had a little bit of a problem. Either way, you can see I've got some small strips cut here. And if you've looked at any of these at all, you can see a lot of people have made homemade jigs. And this will kind of basically work the same way, just with basically a store-bought as the base of it. So the way I'm going to make this work, in my mind, this little pieces of aluminum was basically just a flat piece of T-track. So I'm going to put a bolt and a nut in here, and these are going to kind of act as my spacers. And you can see I've got one that's kind of wide and one's a little bit narrower, or actually two that's a little bit narrower. So I'm going to set one on the outside and the two right here, just because I didn't have anything that thick. I'm doubling up. And so this being on the outside, these are 1/2 inch, so that gives me a 1 inch space. So that should make it pretty close on our cutting board. And I'm just going to screw these together. I don't have any glue up here today. It's kind of a cold day in the shop. I took the glue to the house and forgot to bring it, but I think it's going to do just fine. Now we are going to clamp this up to where they're pretty much flush. I've got one end running long over here. We'll cut that off a little later. So now we'll just make the other 3. We'll get us some hex nuts in here and the bolts, and I hope I've got the right size bolts. Anyway, we'll come in here with those. I may have to add a washer, and I'd like to have a different setup. Unfortunately, this is all I've got right now to go by. So maybe some threaded knobs would probably work good, and I do have some of those on the way. But for now, we're going to make sure this is going to work, and I think it will. But anyway, like I said, let's get to making the other 3. Okay, and so I've got everything put together, as you can see, all 4 of them. Now I just went and made a couple of lines here based on the side of the track. That's kind of the opening in the, the top and the bottom. Traced it all the way across so I know my marks should be good. And then I measured in about 5 inches on each end, just because I'm going to put 2 there, 2 bolts. And if I have to later on, if it's not strong enough, I can always come back and add a 3rd one. But anyway, I'm going to mark these out, drill a couple holes in each one, and we should be just about ready to test this thing again. We'll get our bit pretty much centered up here. Now I did drill this just a little bit larger, and I did actually find some threaded knob, studs, screws, whatever they call these things. They're pretty handy. That way you're not having to sit here with a wrench. You can just grab these by hand and twist them out. I do think I'm going to have to add a washer though. So I think I've got it fixed up here. I've not tried it yet. We're going to get ready to do that. But I did scoot these back so I could get to these where I could loosen them up. So we'll go ahead and I've got me just kind of a, not exactly square piece of cherry here, but it's nice. We're going to see if we can turn that into a cutting board. Give us that juice groove like we've been talking about. We know we're going to Need to go at least that high. I can scoot these up, kind of fill in our gap so that our router's not going to get lost in there. Now, if you do something similar to this, depending on the bit, you may want to set these spacers a little different. I have this particular router here set up with a 3/4 inch coving bit. So I think I've got it set. Hopefully these fences work the way I, planned them to. I've got them good and tight. Got everything tight here. I have this small compact router. What's good for this is it's round. You don't have to worry about twisting and holding your router a certain way. If you do twist, it's going to be the same. But let's see if it actually does what I'm thinking it's going to do. So let's get started. Now you want to start with a shallow pass first, because unless you have a plunge router, you're going to have to set this down very easy and then work your way around. So that's not bad for a first pass. I didn't really get anything out of line. There is some burning, but that's cherry for you. So we're going to go just a tad deeper. Not a ton, because I actually kind of like what it is. Nice deep groove. Now that one, I will say, for the size, probably should have been a smaller cove bit. It's the one I've got. But that's not bad. Go back with some sandpaper and clean that up. And I think we've got pretty much a finished cutting board. So over a couple of days, as I said, I mentioned that this just really was not sitting right with me. I wasn't happy with the way this thing worked, and it done okay. Just wasn't what I planned. Either way, now I think it's functional for the way I need it. If you're interested in making something like this, you can probably make these at home, or if you take something like this, you can modify it just like I did. And as you can see, the results are pretty good. Now I will say, I would rather do this with a 1/2 inch cove bit. I'll have to order me one of those. This one is a little wide for my taste, especially on a board this small. But either way, it kind of shows the process. And I do think if I get the 1/2 inch one, the spacing will look a little better too, because it'll come over just a hair. This is a little close, which I could always add another little shim in here and bump that over if I need to. But either way, I made a couple of nice, quick and easy cutting boards. Easier way to do it once I've got it modified. Good tool now. So guys, we're on to the last tool, and we've been pushing hard through this one. This video has taken me a little while because I've had to modify a lot of these tools. This one included. Now this is a router lift. If you're not familiar with these, basically you chuck this particular one is made for a compact router, but you chuck a router in here and you tighten it down. And from up here, you can actually raise and lower this thing. It's very handy to have, versus running one of these handheld and then twisting them or however you got to do that. This is great to have that option above the table. Going to be a good one. Now, I do plan on later on getting a larger one for my larger router too. But for now, I think what we're going to do, and I am going to do a separate video for this as well. I'll probably add a little more detail into the other one. But we need a way to actually mount this somewhere. So we're going to build a little compact router table. Now I'm planning on making this to where you can set it on a bench top, or possibly even you could mount it over here on your bench. That way it's kind of waist level, so it's not too high. But what I plan on doing with mine is putting a couple little, we'll call them feet. So when I got it right here and I want to use it, I can actually clamp it down to the bench and it's not going to go anywhere. So if you look at this little router lift, you can see it's nicely made. Here's actually where you adjust it, and it comes with the little handle here. It's quite easy. Basically, it's a 10mm socket and an adapter, but you basically twist that thing and you can see that thing. It's a fine adjustment, so it's not super fast, which is a good thing, really. But you twist it one way or the other and to raise it or lower it. So a very nice feature right there. Right here, it actually comes with several of these plates that you're going to sit in here and get that leveled up. That way you're kind of closing everything in here. Some measurements if you want to go by that when you put a fence on here, that sort of thing. But I think for the most part, just having the lift itself is going to be just a game changer. A lot easier to fool with than trying to just adjust this all the time. So as you can see, what I was going for here, just these little feet or whatever you want to call them, allows me to clamp that right on the bench. And once we get our router lift in here, good and solid, it won't be moving anywhere, so you don't have to worry about, the table moving itself, getting, dangerous while that little bits are moving. Good and solid. Now let's mount the router lift. Okay, we are going to have to raise that up a little bit. Seems like there was some set screws or something we could put in here to raise that up. We'll get working on that because it's a little bit low. So we've got it in there. It's good and flush now. Looks good in there. The little template was pretty close. We ended up sanding that to get it good and smooth and good and tight. I did have a little issues. Now I mentioned this thing does not have any kind of instructions that I could find. But getting this level, it was a little bit lower than the top, so we had to come up with a creative solution to make that work. End up sticking some washers underneath the bolts, but as you know, putting those under there, you're either going to drop your bolts or your washers. So we come up with putting a little bit of painter's tape on the top side of the bolts so they wouldn't drop out. Got those started and set in there, but it's in there flush, and like I said, it fits nice. Now, probably my favorite feature of this router lift is just the fact of the lift itself, and the fact that you can raise this thing all the way up here, and you don't have to try to take the router out to do your bit changes. You can do them right here from the top. And it does come with these little plates for different sizes. And I do need to drop those little set screws down. Make sure I've got the right size Allen head. And we'll run us a test piece and see how good it works. And we got a nice little round over, good and smooth. We'll try a couple more bits in here. Nice little detail right there too, good and smooth. Yeah, this is gonna be a great little addition to my shop, your shop, whatever you decide to add this to. It's gonna be a great one. Nice little router lift as well. I have a link to that in the description, of course. So guys, that's going to bring it to the end of this video. Now you've seen we've kind of a little bit struggled to get through all these because I didn't pay attention at the very beginning when I ordered these. Didn't realize some of these they weren't really made to fit the tools I already have. And as I mentioned before, I wanted to bring this video to you, so I ended up having to buy a router. That still didn't work out 100%. But let's go through the good and the bad on all these. And I'm going to start with the first one, which is, the old manual router plane. Very nicely made, if, a little bit industrial. Once you get the blade sharpened up, it cuts great. Very nice adjustability up here. The handles feel good. Now this one, I can say all positives about this one. I can't think of a single negative thing about this one. It works great. It'll be a nice one to add to my collection. Now for the rest of these tools, to be honest with you, if you watched the video, I had to pretty much modify everything about them to make them work with what I've got. The next tool was no exception. This actually fits on a Bosch router that I had to go buy for this video because I didn't have anything that this would fit. And even once I did get it home, in the description, this little attachment says it fits Bosch, Makita, that sort of thing. So I went and got a Bosch, found one on sale. And even after I did, it still did not fit. So I ended up having to go in here with a file right where these screws go in and file that out a little bit. Wasn't too bad, but once I got it in there, it works great. But I did have to modify it. Now, for the most part, this one is pretty much positives. I like the way it works. You move your guides here to the width of your material. Set it in the center, tighten those down. And as long as you've got the appropriate bit, you can make mortises with this or whatever you're trying to do. But for me, it works for mortises. Good quality tool, although like I said, it did not fit mine. So just pay attention to what this fits before you order one of these. Still a good quality tool. So up next, you could see that I struggled a little bit with this one in the video just because it was not the tool I had envisioned in my head. It still worked, but there included a lot of measurements. And once I come back and modified, I added these little fences so that once I trap a cutting board in here, I can trap it, lock it down, run the router, and it's going to make a nice juice groove all the way around the way it's supposed to. So it's positives and negatives. Positive, it is made very well. It's all aluminum. These little pieces here, they tighten it down. Once you're getting it tightened down, it seems like it's pretty square too. The negative, as you know, I had to modify this to make it work the way I wanted. And that's not the tool maker's fault. It was just more in how they made it. Was not my cup of tea. Either way, it's a good quality tool. I know I'll use it for a lot of years. Just had to modify it to make it work to fit to my needs. So I saved my two favorite tools for last, or accessories we'll call them. And the first one of these last two is the big router fence and the router fence attachment, even though I didn't really show you that because I don't have the router table that fits. But as I mentioned, this is kind of for future use. I had planned on building a new router table, and I still intend on doing that with a wider top. And this is what that's for. But now I will say I attached it to the one I've got over there, just a couple clamps, and it worked fine for what it was. It's good and straight. I like how these have these little knurled knobs back here. You can move this fence left or right on both of them. And one thing that really impressed me, I actually shot back up to this with this little rubber hose, and that thing really sucked up a lot of dust. I didn't think it was going to be that good, but I really like that feature of it just because router tends to make a mess more than any tool in the shop. So as far as good and bad, this one for me, as I mentioned, it's pretty much all good, other than the fact that I just don't have the table right now to really utilize what this is made for. It's still going to come in handy, especially for future use. So thumbs up on this one. If you're in the market for a router table fence, check this one out. And finally, on to the last one, quite possibly my favorite tool we've looked at today, just because of the capability of the router lift itself. That is a very handy feature that you're not having to reach under and loosen the router plate up, push it up, or roll it up. However, you can just raise it up and down with that little tool, and that absolutely works flawless. I love that part of it. Now, as I mentioned before, I did have to modify this. Even after buying that new router, this says, when I first bought it, I looked at it wrong. It said 65/69 millimeter router. And so in my brain, that fit anything from 65 to 69. I did not realize you could choose one or the other. So it was 65 or 69 millimeter. This was a 69 millimeter. I didn't have any routers in my shop that size. They were all too small. So I got this one, and it measured just a hair above 69 millimeters. So where this router mounts up, I actually had to go in there and kind of grind that out very slowly. I had to keep going back and forth, and that took a long time. It took me over an hour going back in there and getting that and trying to not get it uneven. Anyway, once I got it in there, it fit great. Took a little maneuvering to get in here. And as I showed you, I built a little router table just for that. So at the end, it was worth it. I really like the router table itself. It's going to come in handy. And the router lift, I plan on having from now on. Highly recommend getting you a router lift. This one works well. Now I will say, I prefer to have one for a larger router. This is for compact routers. So I will be adding one of those to the shop pretty soon too. So guys, that's going to bring us into this video. I hope you enjoyed these tools, even though this is probably the one I had a little more complications with out of any I've ever done. But in the end, we've made these work, and they work well. Give me your thoughts in the comments if you liked any of these tools. As I mentioned, all these will be linked in the description. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next video.